I'm Justin Snyder.
And I'm Stephanie Greenwood Snyder.
We're just an average, everyday couple.
But over the years, we've seen the incredible importance of building community together.
We'll be talking with friends and experts about their stories and experiences to help us learn and grow.
We don't want to just survive through life.
We want to intentionally thrive.
This is The Intentional Thriver.
Welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Thriver podcast, the podcast where we look at not just surviving in your life, but learning how to thrive intentionally, hence the name, the Intentional Thriver. So we have with us two incredible people. We are so honored to have Dave and Barb Folkerts with us. Dave and Barb, how are you?
We are wonderful.
We're good.
Good. Well, all right. So for those who know the show, we always start off with saying a couple things that we appreciate and admire about our guests. And I have to say, Dave and Barb are just such wise people. And not because they're just a little older, maybe just by a couple years than us.
You would have to point that out.
We just got it out early. We got it out early.
Not watching.
Correct. For those not watching.
Even if you are watching, you might not know that because you guys look amazing.
Dave and Barb are truly just incredibly wise people. Again, I just cannot stress enough how thankful we are for your wisdom and guidance, even in our own lives, and being very gifted and talented speakers as well, and teachers, being able to share, because that's one thing to have the experience. It's another thing to be able to clearly and genuinely communicate that to other people.
Absolutely.
So again, we're just very thankful for you both, and we're so excited. So we're not going to waste any more time. We want to dive in because we want to talk about fighting and marriage and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because I know you guys probably never fight, and obviously we never fight, but maybe somebody out there at
all
some
those
point,
other people out
all
there.
those other people,
we gotta help
them. They might have fought.
That's right.
But
see, about 2 or 3 hours ago, I think there was one, wasn't there?
That's real.
That
Thanks for
sounds
bringing
about
that
right.
up. Yeah.
So when we were setting up for this podcast, we got in a pretty good size argument.
Oh yeah,
and we were kind of cooling down afterwards. And Justin looks at him and he goes, I just recorded that whole conversation.
We were running tests for everything, and we had been recording our entire
argument. There were a couple
argument.
of things that we were going back and forth. Did you say that? No, I didn't say that. You said that. Justin goes back and replays
And I listened to it.
the
I'm like,
argument
no, you did say it
and
this way.
proves to me that I did say it.
Yeah,
So-
that probably wasn't the wisest thing to do.
Tell us what we did wrong.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to play that argument right now, and you just walk us through step by step.
That
So
is
here,
true.
no.
That's a
let's
good
not do
example
that.
where you can win the battle and lose the war.
Yeah. Yeah, there were no winners that day. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
No, but Dave, Barb, do you mind just walking us through a little bit of your stories, your background? I know you both have incredible stories. Again, we only have about an hour, so maybe a little more of the condensed version. But do you guys mind sharing a little bit about your background?
Well, I was raised, we were both from Iowa, and raised in a typical Midwest farming community where you learn a strong work ethic. You kind of out on the farm, and it was in a religious environment where we went to church, but didn't really have a personal relationship with the Lord. Went off to college, and through my teenage years and first couple years in college, just really spiraled out of control. Very much addicted to alcohol, and then into drugs, and became a born again Christian at the age of 20, and just radically changed, and graduated from college and went into a career in agriculture where worked for one of the largest agricultural companies in the world.
Wow.
And spent 17 years with them, traveled all over the world. And it was a kind of an exciting time for me. It was really hard though for the family because I was away from my wife and kids.
Sure.
We moved to Florida, and about 2 years into moving down here, went and answered the call of God and became a pastor, and I've been pastoring now for 21 years here in Florida. And so, and I love it. I mean, we were always serving after I became a born again Christian, always serving in church, but kind of ran from the calling actually for many years, but I'm excited and that's enough about me. We got married in 1983, so
You
40
went through that
years.
date
Yeah.
So
in
a couple years.
Wow,
Wow, 40.
40.
Congratulations.
40
Yes,
years.
yes. So
Specifically
And
to
you know
you,
what?
Barb. Congratulations for being
Yeah,
married to
thank
Dave
you.
for 40
Thank you.
years.
I need a big trophy for that. No, I'm just kidding.
Major
No.
kudos.
So I was a pastor's daughter, actually, and didn't really. I did not want to go that way. My whole family was kind of going that way, and I was kind of real super independent. And I thought, nah, I'm going my own way. So I did that. Got in a lot of trouble. Finally, heard somebody on a street corner, believe it or not, explaining about knowing Jesus, and right there on a street corner I gave my heart to the Lord, and when I
Wow.
was just turned 16, and my life drastically changed. And then I went through a series of tragedies,
Mhm.
and really my life just fell apart, and I went to college and really started being controlled by alcohol, kind of trying to forget some things that had happened to me,
Yeah.
and yeah, I hit rock bottom, and finally I remember telling the Lord, I know you could never take me back as a daughter, but would you let me be your servant?
Wow.
And so I gave my heart to the Lord, and he just started putting my life back together, and then pretty soon we were in a community group, and Dave was my leader. And that's where we fell in love, and that's a whole nother story. But God's just been so good, and it's interesting to me because I mean, never in a million years did I think I'd be in ministry. Never. I didn't even want to go to church, let alone be in ministry. And what I have found is that there's so many people like me in the world that have things in their past that have been extremely hurtful, but I'm not that person anymore. And now I have hope, and I have one of the best things in my life is just seeing, coming alongside people and helping them get from their place of brokenness to a place of healthy living, and just a healthy heart. So
That's amazing.
that's kind of where I'm at.
another really important part of our lives that I didn't mention, but
What's that?
that is that we have 3 kids.
Oh, yeah.
What's
Yeah,
that?
let's just
It's
throw
Oh,
them
yeah,
in there.
them.
details, but they're all in their 30s now. They're all married. They're all doing just great with their lives, and we have 4 grandchildren.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
fun.
it's a fun season for us to be in that. I feel like we're reaping the fruit of now the years of hard work parenting.
Yes.
Now our kids are grown, so we can kind of just enjoy
Yes.
the adult children, and we're friends.
Have a
And
blast.
then with the
amazing.
grandkids, kind of a chance to start over again, with just playing and being goofy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and we love your kids. I mean,
Aw.
your middle son and daughter are 2 of our favorite people in the world.
They're all right.
And you guys both mentioned like having some pretty traumatic and rough times in your early 20s and early part of your lives, and then coming together as broken people. But let's talk a little bit about some of the joys that you've experienced in your marriage. What are some, I mean, besides your awesome kids and grandkids, what are
Sure, of
some of
course.
the highlights that you've seen in your marriage?
We love helping people.
Yeah.
We just do. And I mean, we love traveling. We do all, lots of other stuff too. We love to ride our bikes, and we love to travel, and we love to do mission trips and that kind of stuff. But honestly, I think that one of our greatest joys is just coming alongside people and just helping them get from point A to point B, and celebrating with them. And
Yeah,
I mean, what else would you say?
I would say, I love the whole theme of your podcast, and
Yes.
because Intentional Thriver, we have a mission statement that we have used for many years, and that's preparing people for eternity. And so we feel like we want to invest in people.
Mhm.
God's done so much in our lives that we love giving back and
Thankful.
being a servant
Mhm.
too. We really tried to put the servant leadership aspect into life. And if
Absolutely.
we're not here to control anybody, we're here to
Mm.
maybe influence
Yeah.
for good.
That's
Right.
amazing.
But you come from such a place of, like Justin said earlier, wisdom and knowledge. And I think that was such a breath of fresh air for Justin and I. You guys knew us at a very hard season of our marriage and lives.
Yeah.
And you guys were such a breath of fresh air in the way that you didn't hide failures or things that you might not be proud of, but you embraced them because you know that was what made you the people you are now.
It's been kind of a hallmark of our lives because we met, in a Bible study. I was leading and she was attending, and then she became my co-leader. We've been very transparent. We're very willing to share our failures. We don't want to hide things because I guess we've been around a lot of people before that are a bit phony. They're not perfect, but they can't admit it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think people will have this feeling that if somebody really knew my bad stuff, they wouldn't like me.
Yeah.
Right.
And I found that it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Somebody has said once, and it's really stuck with me, that people are impressed with our strengths, but they connect with us in our weakness.
Wow, that's good.
And so as we share our weaknesses, people are like, oh, I can relate to you. I can connect to you. And whenever we've shared our testimonies, I think people say, oh man, I just connect with you at a greater level now than if you try to act like you got it all together, like I got this perfect life and you need to be like me,
Yeah.
Yeah. Working through some of those, again, very hard times, very hard parts of your marriage. What would you say some of those hardest times have been? And how do you feel like you were able to work through some of those times together as a couple?
Yeah, I think some of the hardest years we had was um, I had a few years when I was in the corporate world where I was traveling 100 nights a year, and we
Wow.
had 3 little kids, and I was off staying in 5-star hotels, eating gourmet meals all over Europe, and I couldn't even tell Barb how nice it was because she's having hot dogs and macaroni and cheese with the kids, and they're sick and throwing up, and it was a really hard season. And maybe you wanted to share a little bit about the difficulty that we
Oh,
had.
it was awful. Yeah, probably probably the lowest time in our married life. He says 100 nights, but that doesn't count the times he came home at 11 p.m. and leave at 4 a.m.
Oh,
Wow.
You know what I
wow.
mean? I felt like a single mom. And I went to church one night and, I drugged the kids with me and, all that stuff. And a little lady came up to me, little old lady, and she said, honey, she said, God wants to do, I'll just use you. She said, God wants to do great things in your life. And I'm like, okay. And then she said, but there's got to be forgiveness. I'm like, whoa.
Whoa, okay.
I'm thinking, where did that come from? She didn't even hardly know me. I'm like, what is that? And I went home and I started to realize how bitter I was getting at Dave I felt like I was on my own. I felt like I was raising the kids by myself and he was off living the high life and I was doing the hard work. And so I called him. He was in Vienna and probably in a castle somewhere, and I said, I got to talk to you. And he said, I'm just walking into this meeting. And I actually said, you choose the meeting or you choose me.
Oh, wow.
We must have had a 2 or 3 hour long
Ooh, ouch.
conversation. I actually missed the meeting I flew to Vienna for
Oh,
Wow.
because it was that intense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was intense. Yeah.
But what Barb was working through was she realized that she was bitter. She needed to forgive me, but she needed to also share with me how.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, I'm willing to walk away from this if that's what it means for us to be, stay together.
And so I gave that to God. And a couple weeks later, I mean, he came home in the meantime, but a couple weeks later, he came home. He said, I got another promotion. And every promotion was more travel. And I was like, just stab me in the heart, And this time he said, it's half the travel.
Wow.
Wow.
And what God showed me was I was blocking that blessing because, like if you go into the store and your kid has a tantrum because he wants candy, you're not gonna, well, in theory, you're not gonna give in, but I was kind of having a tantrum about it, and he couldn't really bless that until I made my heart right. And then, I mean, the travel went way down.
Wow.
He took a different position, didn't you? And
Yeah. And then eventually we just really felt like we were called. I was actually called to leave that company because I rose up quite high in it. And it was like so much of my life that it was hard to kind of step away.
Wow.
And felt like I just needed to leave and move. And so ended up taking a job in Florida, another corporate job, but it was even less travel. And we got down here, and one of our kids said, "I think we're having a little bit too much family time." Because we
Ooh.
made such a switch of like being together all the time.
yeah.
But just needed to reprioritize and make
Yeah.
sure that the marriage came before my career.
Yeah. Barb, I want to ask a follow up to that because I think you brought up a really good point, and I think something that a lot of, like, including myself, a lot of people have struggled with within marriage or any kind of relationship is the idea of forgiveness and understanding what forgiveness is and the flip side of that coin, what forgiveness is not at the same time. Because I think sometimes, that old adage, forgive and forget, I don't know if that's necessarily the healthiest. Like, I get the idea behind it, but I don't know if that's necessarily the healthiest of mantras or statements.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about that, about like almost the difference between forgiveness and restoration, for lack of a better word, or how that plays into that?
What we always say is that forgiveness is not trust. It's a choice. It's not a feeling. It's a choice. As Christians, we believe that God wants us to forgive, commands us to forgive. So we make the choice. I always say, if I wait for the feelings, it'll never happen.
Nope.
But you make the choice, and often the feelings follow. But make the choice, and then we've also said that it's not a matter of forgive and forget, because we have brains
Right.
that will never go away. So, I have things in my past that will never ever go away. But at the same time, I can forgive and remember what God has done for me and all the things that God has restored in my life.
Sure.
And that helps me extend forgiveness to other people. And same with Dave.
Yeah, and I just add, forgiveness is not reconciliation. Reconciliation takes it on both parties, a willingness, but forgiveness can be just one person can forgive, and they choose to let it go. They choose to not get retaliation, to hold it against them, and I think forgiveness is not, it's not condoning what the person did. Really, it's actually admitting there was a hurt there.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of more of a canceling the debt, letting it go. Now, what Barb said is so true. It's not trust.
Right.
So if somebody borrows $100 and doesn't pay you back, you may want to forgive them, but you don't have to give them more money if they ask for it. You can say, well, you haven't earned the trust back, because we always say trust takes time and it takes being trustworthy.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think that's such a good statement to bring in again, especially within talking with the context of marriage, is I think there can be a lot of condoning of abuse or toxic relationships in the spirit of that, of saying, I'm just going to forgive this person, I'm commanded to forgive this person, and not fully understanding that forgiving someone doesn't mean you're putting yourself in a position of emotional, physical, chronic hurt and trauma. Like that needs to be addressed and obviously dealt with. And so trust and forgiveness and restoration, forgiveness and trust are part of restoration, of course, but
forgiveness is that first step.
Right.
Then from there, a person needs to be trustworthy, and there need to be boundaries. There may even to be systems to know whether someone's trustworthy.
That's right.
And quite often I counsel couples where there's been adultery And I talked to the couple about how they can rebuild trust, and they have to do a lot of hard work, and it takes a long time. And they can't go a month or two and they say, well, what's the matter? You don't trust me. And like, no, it could take a year or more of being trustworthy before that trust is starting to be built back up.
Forgiveness is not like pushing it under the rug. Sometimes it is making someone else aware that there is something to be forgiven,
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about conflict, right? Because that is a conflict situation where you bring up, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now, or in an unhealthy situation, which unfortunately I fall into probably more than you, like, how dare you do this? How have you found the role of conflict or fighting or arguments or whatever term you want to use plays in a healthy marriage?
One of the things that we started doing, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago now, and that is when we start to sense that we're going through some tension, or we start to feel like there's some, I don't know, negative emotion between us, whether there's words or it's just motion. We always say whoever's a little bit more spiritual at the time will take the other person by the hand and say, we need to pray. And we pray like asking God for help in that situation. We don't pray at the person. We don't use prayer as a weapon, like, Lord, show them they're wrong,
Right.
change their heart, things like that. We use we and our, and we pray. And what is amazing, and we see it every time, when we start to feel that tension and when we pray, the tension comes down, the negative emotion comes down, and now we're at a place where we can talk. We didn't solve the problem as we prayed, but what we did was we put our emotions at a better place for us to communicate. And there have been a few times where we had to do it multiple times in the same conflict. I remember one in particular where we had to pray 3 times because it kept building back up, and we were like,
feel it bubbling up.
But it really, really makes a difference. And if your audience could even put that one thing into practice, I think they would find it. And it doesn't matter. It's probably 50-50, whether it's her begin it or me begin, where, but there's something about the touch too, with taking hands or putting a hand on the shoulder, a kind touch, where we just, we're saying we need to be unified during this time, and we need God's help in this conflict. Because I always say this, it's not conflict that destroys marriages. It's unresolved conflict.
That's good.
And so many people want to avoid it. They want to sweep it under the rug. They want to pretend it didn't happen. They suppress it. And then the next time there's a conflict, it gets added to whatever was unresolved. And that pile gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, and I think too, just that little thing, I mean, that has changed our marriage, because if you can catch it before you're really mad, you know what I mean? Once you're really mad, then you don't even want to be in the same room with the person. But it's like, if you can catch it when you start to feel that tension, what I find is once we've prayed, it's like you're able to be more honest with each other and say, you know what, this really hurts me, or I feel like you're not understanding me in this, you know what I mean? Whatever the situation is. So one thing that we have established between the two of us is we have this thing where we'll say, we need to have a talk. You probably don't want to hear me, tell you this.
When one spouse says, you probably don't want to hear this, that's code for zip it up, just listen, don't overreact, because they're about to share something that you could make it go completely bad if you react. And so just listen. But we've given each other permission to speak into each other's lives in a way of, we see something, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you don't see it, but we see something. And I think that's a real important thing. So in a communication, there's what the person intends, their intention, and then it's how we come across. And I don't know, like, I'll use myself example. I know what I intended in my communication, but I don't know how I come across. She knows how I come across. And oftentimes, what do? We argue like, well, that's not what I meant. But I have to say, I've learned that how we come across is more important than our intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really how our message is received is the most important part of it. And so I need her feedback really to
Mhm.
help me grow and become a better communicator, a better relational person. I need that feedback. And if I trust her that she's not out just to get me or
Mhm.
she's not out just to be critical with me,
Mhm.
but she sees things in me that I don't see in myself, then I could be like reading all kinds of books and listening to podcasts trying to get better. And
Yeah.
I'm missing the best one I could. And that's a person who loves me and sees me
Mhm.
is able to speak that into my life.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That's huge.
I kind of want to talk a little bit more about, you're talking about some of these ways, these healthy ways to work through conflict. And,
Mhm.
honestly, even just having an expectation of conflict, like there is going to be
Mhm.
conflict in a marriage. And that doesn't mean you have a bad marriage. It just
Mhm.
means you're
Yeah.
two different people who
Right.
are going to, who are going to have different perspectives coming into a situation. What are some other ways that you would say are just healthy practices or approaches in dealing with conflict? One that comes to mind for me is timing. Like, what's the right time to, like you were saying, Dave, giving that code word, or Barb, you were saying giving the code word of, hey, we need to talk, and I don't want you to get upset at this.
Mhm.
How important is timing in that, and some of those different pieces?
We make time, and we probably,
Mm.
I think we learned this in about year 7.
Mm.
I don't know how we learned it, some marriage class or teaching we had listened to. So we've been doing this in a long time, but we learned that we had to make time each day just to communicate at the higher levels.
Mm.
Uh, Sometimes Barb would want to start communicating at higher levels and talk about,
Well, that sounds weird. Higher levels.
like more than cliches
English.
or
Yeah.
just,
Mhm.
Yeah.
just more like dialogue from the deeper part of the heart.
Right. Not
Yes.
just information. Not like
Yeah, not just how was your day, that
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
stuff.
Right.
And so sometimes Barb would want to get into, some of those deeper conversations when I just got home from work.
Mm.
And I would be like, I don't want to talk about this stuff now.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I would be just like starting a project, in the home, or wanting to watch a ball game or something. And she'd be wanting to talk to me about something. And I get frustrated with it. I'm like, I don't want, do we have to talk about this now? Can't we do this later? But I never set a time, and it would
Mm.
frustrate her. Or sometimes she would call me at
That's good.
work and want to start getting into something. And I was like,
That was not good.
that was not good either. I mean,
Yeah.
and so, but what we learned is that we needed to, like, let's say you had your boss, you
Mhm.
wouldn't just barge into their office, say, hey, I got to talk to you right now.
Mhm.
You'd set an appointment.
Mhm.
You'd say, hey, can I get together with you? I have something I want to talk to you about. And he might say, or she might say, well, how about, 2 o'clock this afternoon? And I say, okay, now I know there's a time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, what we learned to do was set aside a time in the evening where we could talk about anything and everything.
Mhm.
And for us, we kind of pick it at about 9 to 9:30, and it's not like an exact thing.
Sure.
Mm.
It's not like we don't look at the clock, but we just know there's some time every evening where we're going to talk about anything that might be on our heart that
Mm.
we want to talk about. And the thing that Barb mentioned about where we, touch each other and say, I got something I need to talk to you about. You may not want to hear. That usually happens during those
Mm.
times.
Mm.
And that's where we kind of get past just the kind of the surface things to maybe how we're parenting, how we're spending our money, how we're spending our time, our
Mhm.
things about career, about our home,
Yeah.
things like that. That
Yeah.
happens in that time. And when years ago, when our kids were young, that we'd wait till they got in bed. When they got a little bit older, we might go out on the patio, close the sliding door. When they got old enough where we could go for a walk and they could be home alone, then we'd do in a walk. And that's what we do now. We usually go for a walk or a bike ride,
That's
and
great.
we
Nice.
have those conversations.
One of the things that I felt before we started doing this was I felt like his job was getting the best part of him,
Mhm.
Mm.
and I was getting the leftovers. And I thought, I want to know what's in your heart. I don't care about, I mean, I wanted to know when he was frustrated or when he was excited or when he had a great idea. And I felt like, when he'd come home from work, he was exhausted, but the thing about never setting a time made me feel like, what, do I have to go in your office and sit there for you to listen to me, or for us to have a conversation? So it's been so good, so
Aw.
positive, and it's not even really scheduled at all now. It's just a matter of, before we go to bed, at some point we're gonna share.
We try to do it every night.
Mhm.
I would say we probably average 5 to 6 times a week.
That's
Not
great.
bad.
And so, and we don't get hung up if there's a night that we missed it because of one thing or another in our
Mhm.
schedules and so forth.
Sure.
But, the fact that we have that is an opportunity for us to stay connected and stay one, because
Mm,
that keeps us, a lot of times that avoids a conflict,
Yeah.
because
yeah,
Yeah.
we are communication solves so many
huge.
problems.
Mhm.
And I see it in the church world. I saw it in the business world. And I see it in the family. When there's a
Mhm.
breakdown in communication, now all of a sudden you're more prone to the conflicts.
Mhm.
Yeah. How would you say is a healthy way for you as a parent, for us as parents, to be able to model that to our kids?
Mm.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you being able to deal with it healthily is going to be a way to model that. But it's like finding that balance too, of it's not that you want to have conflict in front of your kids. You don't want to
Right.
put them in a position or expose them to
Mhm.
frustrating or traumatic situations that they don't need to be part of, or that they're too young to,
Mhm.
they
Process. Yeah.
they're the child,
We
you're
really,
the adult,
Mhm.
yeah, we tried to protect our kids from, like arguing in front of the kids, and we wanted to create doesn't mean we didn't do it behind closed doors,
Sure.
Right.
but
Unless you were driving, and then all bets were off.
Oh.
Ah.
It was
The
like,
car
I think
was.
that was the case for most
family
families.
vacations in the minivan.
woo,
Oh.
yeah.
But
It could
those
be
were
bad.
not usually conflicts between Barb and I. It was usually more like conflicts between me and the kids.
Oh.
Me and whoever was in the backseat.
We got 3 strong-willed kids,
Yeah.
and oh man, they knew how to push each other's buttons, and ultimately they were pushing our buttons.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I was more of the Stephanie, like you, the more of the explosive one,
Mhm.
and Barb would be the more of
I
the
was the peacemaker.
yeah. You would kind of
Tried.
hold it in better.
I was gonna say, teasing. I was gonna say, don't throw things at each other. No,
Noted. Let me write that down.
Ideal. Yeah.
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 I actually heard something today, Justin, about that, which I thought was really good. Is if your kids do see you fighting, make sure they see you resolving it
Oh,
and
that's good.
coming
Oh,
That's good.
to a healthy. Make sure if maybe that's not ideal,
They see the full
but
process.
that they see the whole process,
Yeah.
so that they're
Yeah.
not scared. Oh, mommy and daddy are fighting.
Mhm.
They get to see the resolution. And I was like, oh, that's so good,
That's
because I do want
powerful.
my kids to understand that it is inevitable. I mean, in the workplace, it's inevitable. I was talking to team members today
Yeah.
about that. So I don't want my kids to be so fearful of conflict because they didn't get to be modeled any of it. But I definitely need them to see the resolution, which almost gives me a little bit of hope. Like, okay, if I
Yeah.
do slip up, like, as I just have to take it
which
all the
we
way to
will.
the yeah.
It's not a question of
Right.
if, it's a question of when.
That's one thing I modeled for our kids, is saying I'm sorry, because
Yeah.
I would get angry, and I dealt with it. I had an anger issue for a long time. I'm over it now, but I had an anger issue, and I would get explosive, and then
Mm.
I would realize I was wrong quickly, and I want to get over it quickly. But then there was damage done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I modeled for my kids, going to them by saying, I'm sorry, daddy was wrong. Please forgive me.
Mm.
Wow.
And I do know that there's a lot of people out there who make mistakes and they can never admit that they've wrong.
Yep.
And they don't never take the responsibility. And I think that even when we fail, we can model failure to our kids. Like,
Yeah.
hey, and we believe we need a savior, and so we can teach our kids, like mom and daddy need a savior too, because that's we are not perfect. We need someone that helps us.
I know in my life I have had huge failures, and I know when I've stood up in front of people and I've told them sometimes, and I look in their eyes and it's like, wow. You know what I mean? There's something
Yeah.
powerful
So powerful.
about a person that's saying, I was so horribly wrong.
Yes.
And yet God forgave me. I, when
Yes.
asked
Yes.
forgiveness to whomever, and I'm not there anymore. Because I think what happens is people feel, I mean, I did 100%. I felt like that's who I was. I failed, so that's who I was. That's who I would always be. And when we can just say, obviously give that to God and let God work in our lives. And that's over time. It's not like,
Yeah.
it's not usually like okay, in and out, you're done. But just giving that to God, and then allowing myself to say, I really blew it, but God has done great things in my life. It's liberating. It's
Yes, it
liberating
is.
to me, but it's also liberating to that person that's sitting there that thinks, I'll never be better.
Wow.
I'll never be free of this.
Yeah.
And because it's like a scar. And no, those scars, A, they can be healed, and B, they can be used.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great.
I remember when you were telling years ago, Dave, about your struggle with anger and stuff like that, which is something I struggle with. Surprise, surprise. I remember asking your son, Luke, like, is this real? Like, did your dad real? I just cannot see your dad like this. Like, maybe I can see it a little bit. And he was like, oh yeah, it was real. And I was like, well, what was your process, as a kid in this experience? And he said the most beautiful thing. He said, like, it made God more real to him that he saw his dad struggle and have a victory in something like that. But I think that was such a powerful message to your kids that you didn't hide that and you didn't, shy away from it or say like, oh, like, that's just who I am, or I was testing you or whatever. You admitted it was your fault.
That's the way I was raised. My father or whatever was angry. Like that's, hey, it's just in my DNA, And that's a cycle that needs to be broken. And not saying that's easy. I mean, that's a very real thing that if that can be a very hereditary
But
struggle.
I think
But
that probably spoke more to your kids than even going, church on Sunday, like that they saw you have victory in something that was that
real,
controlled you for a season of your life.
So we're all work in progress.
That's
and that one was a harder one. Actually, I was able to give up an alcohol and drug addiction quickly.
Wow.
But anger took 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, and I don't know, maybe I excused it away. Maybe I didn't get serious with it. Maybe I justified it. I don't know. But when I saw how it was damaging the people that I love the most, I man, I got to get serious about this. And I still remember we went on a family vacation where we were gone for a week and we were all talking at the end. Isn't it something Dad never got mad once during the whole week?
Whoa.
It was kind of like, yay, a victory.
Good job, Dad. Ouch.
Hey, that's having gone, like, being the 7th of 8 kids and having gone on a few of those family vacations, that is a feat. That is no small feat.
Yeah. I do want to talk about like some advice you would have, 40 years and you've given us so much wisdom over the years in our marriage, but what is something that you would love to just give to someone young in their marriage or someone struggling in their marriage? What is some advice you would give for a healthy, happy marriage?
Yeah.
Well, I think for us, the most important part is we both see each other as number 2 in our lives. That we have, it's not a religion to us. It's a relationship with our Creator through Jesus Christ. It's a relationship with God through Jesus. And He's truly number 1 in our lives. We spend time in His Word. We spend time in prayer. And we do that individually because we believe it's a personal relationship with God. And as we have put God number 1, He puts His love in our heart for each other. And so when she has a bad day and so forth, I can have this where I want to serve her, I want to help her because I'm not dealing with as much selfishness as I might normally have if I'm not doing that. And so I think that's a huge thing that we really see, that we're here to serve each other. And I think a lot of people feel like, man, 40 years, how would we still even be in love? Would it wear off? We're actually more in love. Our marriage is better And
amazing.
I don't know if
Truly is.
it gets better like every year in a straight, linear line, but it's definitely
Sure.
getting better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we're best friends. We
Mhm.
enjoy things together. We enjoy, whether it's going for walks, bike rides, travel,
Mhm.
ministry.
Mhm.
We love doing ministry and
Mhm.
being with people.
Mhm.
But we have things in common, but we have other things. We're very different personality wise. So
Mhm.
it's not because we're the same type of person.
Right.
Mhm. I think a couple things come to my mind. I mean, there's 100 things, but one thing is never let the fun die. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
When you're dating, you're having fun, you're doing all kinds of, special things. Keep doing those things. It just takes more work when you've got children,
Mhm.
more planning.
Yep.
But yeah, we've always tried to
Dates.
prioritize dates and vacations and things where you're not on duty, where you're not working, and you can just enjoy each other, and that's
Sure.
huge. Another thing, and this is just kind of a bizarre thing to think about, but um, marriage has an expiration date,
Oh.
Hmm.
and I get to be his wife for X amount of days.
Wow.
And when that day comes, when one of us is gone, that time's over. And
Wow.
I cherish you.
Oh.
I didn't expect to say that, but I do. And I think,
Mm.
my goodness, if I don't want that day to ever come, but it will.
Mhm.
But but right now we've got each other. We got health. We've got
Yeah.
a reasonable amount of money, and
Mhm.
life is good. And
Mhm.
and honestly, our favorite things in the world is to go somewhere where people don't have what we have and just give them what we have. Like
Mhm.
Mm.
we're going to go to Guatemala here in a few
Wow.
Right.
months, and those people have nothing, and we can just encourage them and come alongside them and teach them what few things we've learned. And
Yeah.
I
That's
don't know.
incredible. What would you say for people who um maybe aren't there yet? Maybe they're still single, they're wanting to get married. That's a desire that they have. And I mean, honestly, that's one of the most important decisions. I think one of the most important decisions you're gonna make in your life. Like
Sure.
who my partner is gonna be, who's the one that I'm going to be having these fights and conflicts with, someone that I can trust, someone that
Mhm.
like I know is gonna be in my corner, that we're gonna be heading in the same direction in life together.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for people who are single in meeting a future spouse, or honestly even for
Mm,
people who maybe have come out of a divorce or maybe
Right.
a bad or abusive relationship, and
mm,
they do want to get married again, but there's obviously a lot of hurt and baggage coming out of it. Like, again,
sure.
what advice would you have
One of the
within that?
things is that before we invest into a relationship that could lead to marriage, it's so important that we first work on ourselves
Mhm.
Mm,
and that we take a look at our inventory. Do we have that baggage? Do we have
Mm,
some stuff that are out of balance? Do
Mhm.
we need to work on our own heart?
Mhm.
Because, if you carry all that into the next relationship, you could be at a disadvantage right from the start.
wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that what I have seen, and I've seen in our three kids who are married, I see it in our lives, we all met our spouse
mm,
when we were serving.
Mm.
Wow.
And
That's
you
right.
think about it, there are two types of people, those that want to be served and those who are serving.
mm,
Mm,
And if you're unhealthy, I'm talking about emotionally,
mhm.
spiritually, if you're unhealthy, you're wanting people to serve you, you're
mm,
wanting people to somehow bring joy to you, bring some
Mhm.
satisfaction because you're unhealthy
Yeah.
inside.
That's good.
But if you're healthy inside, you're secure in yourself and you want to help other people. You're grateful for
mhm,
what God has given you and you want to serve others. And
Yeah.
so all three of our kids and Barb and I, we all met our spouse when we were serving and they
mm,
were
Cool.
serving.
Mm,
mhm,
Mhm.
So I think that's a huge one, the serving. The other aspect is how do you get to know someone? And I think sometimes people have this, I don't know, idea of what a first date should be like. Like, it's going to be this romantic, expensive dinner out and a movie and all that type of stuff. I tell people all the time, just go get coffee or dessert and just get to know them. Ask
Mm.
questions, get to know them. And if you sit there and you really like, wow, can you believe 2 or 3 hours have gone by and we just gonna continue to keep talking? That's a good sign.
That is.
If you're sitting there and the one person hasn't taken a breath because they're doing all the talking and they're not asking you questions, but they're just kind of like they're on an interview selling themselves. That's not a good situation.
Yeah.
And a person will be like, well, I don't know that I want to invest much more because the other person seems like they're all hung up on themselves. But a healthy first relationship should be where you're asking mutual amount of questions of each other just to get to know each other, and you're real and you have some laughs and that type of thing, but you take that pressure off of. I wouldn't even call it a date. I would just call it a, like, I want to get to know you.
Yeah.
And we've had some of our kids do that. I think the worst one is when you go to a movie because you're expected to be quiet.
Yeah.
And there's that
What's the point
awkwardness.
of that?
Do I hold her hand? We're on a
Plenty of
date. Do
time
I
for
put
that.
my arm around her? We're on a date. And it's awkward. You can't really even talk.
Right.
And so I think just maybe a coffee shop,
Yeah.
you know, or going for ice cream or something might be a better way just to get to know someone and don't make a high expectation of it.
Yeah.
So no castle in Vienna for the first date.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Why not? If you're in Vienna, go to a
I,
castle.
sure. If you live in Vienna, if you live in Georgia
There
or
you
Florida,
go.
maybe don't fly out to Vienna to a castle for the first
For the
date.
first
Second
date.
date, sure, go wild, but
Go for it.
Watch a movie.
watch a movie for the second date.
Another thing that you have already, I think, touched on is community is huge. Get a solid, find a solid group of people that are kind of like-minded and also maybe same, season of life, and do stuff as a group. You can watch from afar. That's kind of how I fell in love with him. He was leading our home group, but I was watching him from afar. He had no idea that I was watching him.
I was watching her.
Oh.
Barb, we call that
I really
stalking.
thought she was Italian because she made some great lasagna. Then I found out she wasn't Italian, but
Very mean
well.
again. But anyway, yeah, you can tell the thing you say about how people treat people.
yeah, I mean, what you want to do when you're observing, let's say you're kind of progressing in a relationship and you're trying to determine, is this the one I should invest, the rest of my life with? Look at how they treat people above them, like people that are in authority. Look at how they treat people that are below them that they might have authority over, and how they treat peers.
That's good.
And if it's a healthy person, they should have like healthy relationships around. If they want to pull you apart away from your friends, they don't want to hang out with your friends, maybe they have something to hide. And it's also why I don't believe, you want to go and get real physical in a relationship, because you could connect in a way that you're not shouldn't, because you might feel like, oh, we're so made for each other. But that could be really putting blinders on so that you don't see some of these other types of things. And so there's wisdom in the things that God prohibits. I know that.
With this podcast being called The Intentional Thriver, everything that we've talked about, I think we've been touching on it from so many components, but what does that mean to you guys? What does that mean to intentionally thrive in your life?
I think there's an intention deficit. Because there is a lot of people intention deficit, because there's a lot of people are not intentional.
Yeah.
Kind of go with the flow, whatever feels good, do it. And I'm a very intentional person, so this fits me really well. I probably a little too structured maybe at times, but I think for me, it just comes natural to be the intentional, but the thriving part. I think this might be a little bit different than what people think. And my thriving part is just being content. I recently spoke at a men's event at another church, and I told everybody, I said, you all know about Elon Musk and you all know about Jeff Bezos, but I said, I want you to know the richest man in the world is standing before you today. And I said, I feel like I'm the richest man in the world because I don't need anything.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm so content. It's like I can't hardly describe it, but I
Mhm.
think that's something that
Mm.
God has given me that I don't need anything. It's like,
Mm.
it's not like, hey, we're all rich and we got everything. No, it's
Right.
like there's it's not about how much you have, it's how little you need. And
Mhm.
so
Mm,
when you're in where I feel like you're in God's
Mm.
purposes and you're
Mhm.
fulfilling why he has you here on this earth,
Mhm.
there's a contentment that comes
Mhm.
from that money can't buy.
Right.
And I think sometimes some very wealthy people, they're still striving because they still don't
Mhm.
have enough. There's one more thing to conquer.
yeah.
And now that doesn't mean you just kind of like get real lazy and so
Mhm.
forth.
Mhm.
Again, I'm very intentional, but it's like the thriving part is, to me, it's kind of related to contentment.
Yeah.
What would
Mhm.
you say?
Okay.
Really good.
We were in Haiti. We were on a
Mm.
mission trip in Haiti,
Mm.
and uh, I was just devastated to see the poverty there. It was,
Mhm.
I mean, we saw kids with no clothes on. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of kids with no clothes on. They had nothing. And we walked out one morning to this bakery. There's some group had set up this bakery to employ people, to give money to the locals there. And somebody put a piece of bread in my hand, and I was just so overwhelmed with this, just this horrible need around me.
Mhm.
And as we walked down this road, I saw we went by a dump, and there was a little girl, she's probably four
Oh
years old,
my.
5 years old, with a stick. She had a mask over, like a handkerchief over her mouth, and she was digging, and there was fire in the dump, and she was digging for something either to eat or to sell.
Mm,
Wow.
And I just couldn't handle it. And all of a sudden I realized I have a piece of bread in my hand from
mm,
this bakery. And they had said, don't go up, don't give people stuff because they can swarm you, and all, cause your team danger. Anyway, so I ran up behind her. I just hugged her as tight as I could. And I put that bread in her hand. And then I ran off and I just sobbed like somebody died.
Oh.
And God, over the days and weeks after that, God just spoke to my heart and said, "You have the bread of life,
Mm.
wow.
and you have the opportunity to share it with people, not ever in a condemning way, like we got it all together, and too bad you don't.
Mhm.
Nothing like that. It's just we have love that we have to share, and
Mhm.
that for me is living intentionally. That is how I want to spend my life, just looking for those moments. It doesn't have to be in Haiti. It can be in the grocery store. It can be when you're putting your child to bed,
Mm,
and just sharing the love of God with people, the genuine love of God.
Mhm.
And it's only because God gives it to us. It's only because He's forgiven us 10 million times,
Right.
and we'll need it 10 more million times. But
Mhm.
um, so yeah, I guess that's a really long answer to a short question. But
No. That's
there you go.
sometimes those are the best
Yeah.
answers.